The first gunshot of the season echoed through the valley as Clara Jenkins ducked behind a barrel outside the general store, clutching her few belongings in a worn leather satchel. Dust swirled around her ankles, and the Montana Territory of 1878 seemed as unforgiving as the day she'd arrived 3 weeks prior. The job at the boarding house had fallen through, her savings were dwindling, and now some drunken cowpunchers were shooting at bottles too close to where she stood for comfort. "You all right, miss?" A deep voice startled her. Clara looked up to see a tall man with piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a dusty Stetson. His weathered face was kind but guarded, like most folks who'd survived the harshness of the frontier. "Yes, thank you," she replied, standing straighter and brushing the dust from her plain calico dress. "Just startled by the noise. Youngblood's boys," he said with a nod toward the saloon. "Sheriff's probably sleeping off last night's whiskey." He studied her for a moment. "Haven't seen you around long. You staying at Widow Miller's place?" "Not anymore," Clara admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. The position as a teacher didn't materialize as promised. The man nodded, understanding without judgment. Clara appreciated that. Ever since leaving Chicago after her father's death, she'd encountered either pity or predatory interest from most men. "Name's Yates Sutton," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Got a small spread about 3 miles west of town." "Clara Jenkins," she replied with a small curtsy. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Sutton." Another shot rang out, followed by raucous laughter. Yates frowned. "Town's getting wilder with the cattle drives coming through. Not safe for a lady alone." He glanced at her satchel. "You need work." Clara straightened her shoulders. "I do, Mr. Sutton. I'm educated. I can read, write, and do figures. I can cook, clean, and sew as well." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "My sister was supposed to come help with the cabin this season, but she's expecting and can't travel from Colorado." He cleared his throat. "It's not much, but I need someone to get the place in order. Been living like a wild man since winter." Clara considered her options, which were painfully few. "Would I stay in town or—" "There's a small room off the kitchen. Door locks from inside." He seemed to understand her concern. "I'd pay fair and bring you to town when needed. It's honest work, Miss Jenkins." Something about his straightforward manner reassured Clara. She'd learned to read people during her journey west, and Yates Sutton struck her as a man of his word. "I accept, Mr. Sutton." She extended her hand in a businesslike manner. He took it briefly, his calloused palm dwarfing her smaller one. "We'll leave when I finish my supplies." Wagons hitched out front. An hour later, Clara sat beside Yates on the buckboard as they headed west out of Timber Creek. The afternoon sun warmed her face as she took in the sweeping landscape, rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen trees, distant mountains still capped with snow, and wildflowers painting the meadows in splashes of color. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. "Gets in your blood," Yates agreed, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Different from Chicago, I imagine," Clara nodded. "Very. I never saw such open space before traveling west. What brought you all this way?" His tone was conversational, not prying. Clara hesitated before answering. "My father passed last fall. Influenza. The family home went to creditors." She looked down at her gloved hands. "I had an offer to teach out here, but when I arrived, they'd given the position to the mayor's niece." Yates made a sound of disapproval. "Sounds like Councilman Whitaker's doing." Man's never met a promise he couldn't break. They fell into comfortable silence as the wagon rolled along. Clara observed her new employer from the corner of her eye. Yates Sutton was not what she would call handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his nose slightly crooked from what must have been a break. But there was something compelling about him. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and the few times he smiled, it transformed his entire face. As they crested a hill, Yates gestured ahead. "That's it." Clara followed his gaze to a sturdy log cabin nestled at the edge of a meadow, backed by a stand of pines. A small barn and corral stood nearby, with a creek winding through the property. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. "You left a fire burning?" she asked, concerned. "No, that'll be Cooter, old-timer who helps out when I'm in town." As the wagon approached, an elderly man emerged from the cabin, wiping his hands on a rag. He watched them with open curiosity. "Brought company, I see," Cooter called as Yates pulled the wagon to a stop. "Miss Jenkins, this is Cooter Williams. Known him since I was knee-high to a grasshopper." "Cooter, this is Miss Clara Jenkins. She'll be helping put this place to rights." Cooter tipped his hat. "About time. Place needs a woman's touch, something fierce." Clara smiled politely, though her heart sank as they entered the cabin. Cooter hadn't exaggerated. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Dishes were stacked haphazardly, clothes draped over chairs, and dust covered most surfaces. A coffee pot simmered on the cast iron stove, filling the air with a bitter aroma. "I know it's a sight," Yates said, clearly embarrassed. "Been meaning to tackle it, but between the cattle and fixing fences." "It's nothing a good cleaning won't fix," Clara assured him, already formulating a plan of attack. "May I see where I'll be staying?" Yates showed her to a small but private room with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the creek. Someone had made an effort to clean this space at least, and fresh linens sat folded on the bed. "Put those on this morning," Cooter said proudly. "Figured you'd want clean sheets, whoever you were." "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "This will be fine." After settling her few possessions and washing up, Clara returned to the main room, rolling up her sleeves. "I'll start with the kitchen, if that's agreeable." "You don't need to begin today," Yates protested. "You've had a long journey." "I prefer to keep busy, Mr. Sutton," Cooter chuckled. "She's a doer, this one. Good luck, Yates," he winked at Clara. "I'll be heading back to my place now, got my own mess to tend to." After the older man departed, Clara got to work. She found an apron hanging on a peg and tied it around her waist, then filled a bucket with water from the pump outside. Yates hovered awkwardly for a few moments before announcing he needed to check the cattle in the north pasture. "There's stew in the pot," he said before leaving. "Help yourself when you're hungry." Left alone, Clara worked methodically, finding satisfaction in bringing order to chaos. She washed dishes, swept floors, and organized the pantry. By the time dusk fell, the kitchen was transformed. She had just stooped to sweep behind the stove when Yates returned. He stood in the doorway, staring at the gleaming surfaces and organized space. I hardly recognize it." Clara smiled, pleased by his reaction. "Just needed some attention." She held up the broom. "I'll finish sweeping behind the stove, then tackle the living area tomorrow." Yates crossed the room in 3 strides and gently took the broom from her hands. Their fingers brushed momentarily, sending an unexpected warmth up Clara's arm. "You've done more than enough for one day," he said, leaning the broom against the wall. Then, with a sincerity that caught her off guard, he added, "I don't just need someone to sweep my cabin, Miss Jenkins. This place needs life brought back to it. Maybe we could build something here together." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning beyond their surface simplicity. Clara felt her cheeks warm as she realized what he might be suggesting. "Mr. Sutton, we've only just met," she said carefully. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly boyish despite the lines around his eyes. "I didn't mean that as I'm not proposing marriage, Miss Jenkins. Just saying maybe this arrangement could be more than temporary if it suits us both." Clara nodded, relieved yet oddly disappointed. I understand. Let's see how things progress, shall we? The following days fell into a rhythm. Clara rose early, prepared breakfast, and worked on the cabin while Yates tended to the small herd of cattle and other ranch duties. They took their midday meal together, during which Yates would tell her about his plans for the ranch or ask about her life in Chicago. She learned he had come west after the war, working as a drover before saving enough to buy this land 3 years ago. He spoke little of the war itself, but occasionally Clara caught a faraway look in his eyes that suggested memories best left buried. For his part, Yates discovered Clara had been raised by her scholarly father after her mother's death in childbirth. She had assisted in his bookshop, developing a love for literature and learning that had led her to pursue teaching. "You miss it?" "Teaching, I mean," he asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and pink. "I never actually taught formally," Clara admitted. "Just helped neighborhood children with their letters sometimes. But yes, I miss the possibility of it." Yates was quiet for a moment. "Town's growing. They'll need another teacher eventually." Clara appreciated his attempt at encouragement, though she'd begun to doubt she would ever stand before a classroom of eager minds. Strangely, the thought didn't sting as it once had. The ranch was becoming home in ways she hadn't expected. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of approaching horses. She shaded her eyes, spotting 3 riders approaching from the direction of town. Yates emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression guarded as he recognized the visitors. "Miss Jenkins, please go inside," he said quietly as he walked past her. "Is something wrong? Just a precaution. Those are Youngblood's men." Clara gathered her laundry basket and retreated to the porch, not quite obeying his instruction to go inside. She watched as the 3 riders pulled up in front of the cabin. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down one cheek, dismounted with fluid grace. "Sutton," he called. "Been a while." "Not long enough, Vance," Yates replied coolly. "What brings you to my property? Just passing through." Vance's eyes flickered to Clara on the porch. "Heard you had company, didn't believe it myself." He tipped his hat to her. "Madam." Clara nodded stiffly but said nothing. "Your business." Yates pressed, stepping slightly to block Vance's view of Clara. "Boss wants to discuss water rights again. Creek runs through his property before reaching yours." "Nothing to discuss. My deed includes water rights. Judge Harmon confirmed it last spring." Vance shrugged. "Mr. Youngblood thinks arrangements can be made, neighborly-like. Tell Youngblood if he dams that creek again, I'll have the marshal out here so fast his head will spin," Yates said evenly. One of the other riders snorted. "Marshal's in Youngblood's pocket these days." "Then I'll handle it myself," Yates replied, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. Tension crackled in the air. Clara held her breath, clutching the laundry basket so tightly her knuckles whitened. Finally, Vance laughed, breaking the standoff. "Always did admire your grit, Sutton. I'll deliver your message." His eyes drifted to Clara again. "Shame about your teachin' job, miss. Heard about that. Mighty convenient for the mayor's family, wasn't it?" Clara stiffened, wondering how he knew her circumstances. "Your business is concluded, Vance," Yates said firmly. "Best be on your way before the light fades." With a mock salute, Vance remounted his horse. "We'll be seeing you, Sutton. You too, Miss Jenkins." The 3 riders departed, kicking up dust as they galloped away. Clara set down her basket and joined Yates in the yard. "Who is Youngblood?" she asked. Yates's jaw was tight. "Edmund Youngblood owns the largest spread in the county, thinks that entitles him to everyone else's land and water." He turned to her, concern evident in his eyes. I don't like that they know your name and circumstances. Will there be trouble? There's always trouble with young blood, he sighed. I'm sorry you got caught up in this, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite the circumstances, she found she liked the sound of it on his lips. I'm not afraid, she said, surprised to find it true. Yates studied her for a long moment. No, I don't believe you are. A smile touched his lips. You're something special, Clara Jenkins. That evening, as Clara prepared supper, her mind kept returning to the confrontation and to the way Yates had stood his ground. There was a quiet strength to him that she admired. More than that, she realized she felt safe with him, despite the potential danger Youngblood represented. I've been thinking, Yates said as they ate. Town's having a social on Saturday. Might be good for you to meet some of the other women, make some friends. Clara looked up from her plate, surprised by the suggestion. Are you sure it's wise? With Youngblood's men watching the ranch, Cooter can keep an eye on things. Besides, he added with a determined set to his jaw, I won't have Youngblood dictating how we live our lives. Clara nodded, touched by his inclusion of her in our lives. Then I would be pleased to attend the social, she said, though I have nothing suitable to wear for such an occasion. We'll stop at Widow Miller's shop on the way. She keeps a selection of ready-made dresses. Clara started to protest the expense, but Yates held up a hand. Consider it part of your wages. Can't have my housekeeper looking anything less than proper, can I? The genuine warmth in his eyes made Clara's heart flutter in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. She was developing feelings for Yates Sutton, feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his kindness. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Clara washed her hair and pinned it in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. When they reached town, Yates escorted her to the Widow Miller's shop as promised. The older woman greeted them warmly. Mr. Sutton, and this must be Miss Jenkins. I've heard so much about you, dear. Clara glanced at Yates, who suddenly seemed very interested in examining a display of men's hats. With the widow's help, Clara selected a dress of soft blue cotton with delicate white piping. It wasn't fancy by Chicago standards, but when she emerged from the fitting room, the look on Yates's face made her feel as though she were wearing the finest silk. It suits you, he said simply, but his eyes conveyed much more. The social was held in the newly constructed schoolhouse, a fact that brought a pang to Clara's heart. Women bustled about, arranging food on long tables while men set up for the musicians. Children darted between adults, their excitement palpable. Yates kept a hand lightly at Clara's elbow as he introduced her around. She met the doctor and his wife, the blacksmith's family, and various ranchers from the surrounding area. Everyone was welcoming, though she noticed curious glances and whispered conversations following their progress. They're wondering about us, she murmured to Yates as they helped themselves to punch. Let them wonder, he replied with a slight smile. Gives them something to do besides gossip about the price of beef. Clara laughed, relaxing slightly. The musicians began to play and couples moved to the cleared area for dancing. Would you care to dance, Miss Jenkins? Yates asked formally, extending his hand. I would be delighted, Mr. Sutton, she replied, matching his tone while her heart raced traitorously. Yates proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer despite his imposing frame. He led Clara confidently through a waltz, his hand warm against her back. She found herself drawing closer than propriety strictly dictated, breathing in the clean scent of soap and the outdoorsy essence that was uniquely his. You dance beautifully, he murmured near her ear. As do you. Where did a rancher learn to waltz so well? A shadow crossed his face briefly. Before the war, my mother insisted all her children learn, said it was a civilized skill that would serve us well. She was right, Clara said softly. Where is she now? Gone. Yellow fever took both my parents in '68. I'm sorry. He shook his head slightly. It was a long time ago. The music shifted to a livelier tune, and Yates smiled. Do you know the Virginia reel? Before Clara could answer, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Edmund Youngblood had arrived, flanked by Vance and several other men. The room quieted as the rancher surveyed the gathering with proprietary interest. Youngblood was older than Clara had expected, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and an expensive suit that set him apart from the other attendees. His eyes locked onto Yates and Clara, and he made his way directly toward them. "Sutton," he greeted, his voice carrying enough to ensure those nearby could hear. "Glad to see you socializing. Thought you might be too busy protecting that little creek of yours." Several people chuckled nervously. Yates's posture stiffened, but his voice remained even. "Youngblood, didn't expect to see you at a community gathering." "I support all community endeavors," Youngblood replied smoothly. His gaze shifted to Clara. "And this must be the school teacher who wasn't. Miss Jenkins, isn't it? A pleasure." He extended his hand, and Clara reluctantly placed hers in it, expecting a handshake. Instead, Youngblood raised her fingers to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that made her skin crawl. "Mr. Youngblood," she acknowledged, withdrawing her hand as quickly as politeness allowed. "I understand you've taken up residence at Sutton's ranch," he continued. "Unusual arrangement for a young lady of your background." The implication was clear, and Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger. "Miss Jenkins is my housekeeper," Yates said firmly. "And under my protection." Youngblood raised an eyebrow. "Protection, is it? Interesting choice of words." He turned back to Clara. "My offer still stands, Miss Jenkins. The position of governess for my grandchildren remains open, much more suitable for a woman of your education and sensibilities." Clara blinked in surprise. "I wasn't aware of any such offer, Mr. Youngblood." "No, I sent word through Councilman Whitaker weeks ago when you first arrived in town." Youngblood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps he forgot to mention it. Yates made a sound of disgust. "Or perhaps he deliberately withheld it, knowing you'd want something in return." Youngblood shrugged elegantly. "Politics is a game of favors, Sutton, something you've never quite grasped." He focused on Clara again. "The offer remains open, Miss Jenkins. Comfortable quarters, good wages, and the chance to use your education. Far better than playing house in a one-room cabin, I should think." Clara felt Yates tense beside her, and sensed this confrontation was about much more than a job offer. It was about power and territory, and somehow, she had become part of the contested ground between these two men. "Thank you for your consideration, Mr. Youngblood," she said carefully, "but I am quite content with my current position." Disappointment flashed across Youngblood's face, quickly replaced by calculation. "As you wish, but should you change your mind?" He produced a calling card and pressed it into her hand. "She won't," Yates said bluntly. Youngblood smiled thinly. "We shall see." "Miss Jenkins seems like a practical woman." He tipped his hat. "Enjoy the festivities." As he walked away, Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "What was that about?" Yates's jaw was tight. "Youngblood trying to get under my skin, using you to do it. Is that all?" She pressed, sensing there was more. Yates hesitated, then took her elbow and guided her toward the doors leading to the schoolhouse porch. The evening air had cooled, and Clara shivered slightly. Without comment, Yates removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. "Youngblood and I have history," he said finally, leaning against the railing. "His son Ezra and I fought in the same regiment. Ezra didn't make it home." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "It wasn't my fault, but Youngblood needed someone to blame, and I was there. Yates stared out at the darkened street. Been trying to run me off my land ever since. First with offers to buy, then with threats, now with water disputes. Man can't stand losing. Clara wrapped the jacket tighter around herself, inhaling Yates's scent from the fabric. And the governess position. Was that real? Probably. His daughter lives with him since her husband died, has 2 young children. Yates turned to look at her, his expression troubled. Would you consider it? Better accommodations, proper work, teaching? No, Clara said firmly. I wouldn't. Relief washed over his features. Why not? Clara hesitated, knowing her answer would reveal more than might be wise. But something about the moment, the music floating through the open doors, the stars emerging in the darkening sky, the vulnerability in Yates's eyes gave her courage. Because I'm building something I care about, she said softly, with someone I care about. Yates stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Clara, he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. I've been trying to find the right words, the right time. Perhaps there are no right words, she whispered. Only honest ones. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. I never expected you, never thought I'd find someone who could make that cabin feel like a home again. Someone who would look at this hard land and see beauty. Clara leaned into his touch. I never expected to find safety and purpose so far from everything I knew, or to find a man who values strength and gentleness in equal measure. I'm falling in love with you, Yates said simply. Have been since you stood in my kitchen with that broom, determined to bring order to my chaos. Clara's heart soared at his words. And I with you, though I tried to convince myself it was merely gratitude. Yates's smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and worry. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but when Clara slipped her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent. All the unspoken feelings of the past weeks poured into that embrace, hope and longing and the promise of something lasting. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I don't want you as my housekeeper, Clara Jenkins. I want you as my partner, my wife, the mother of my children. Are you proposing, Mr. Sutton? She asked, her voice teasing though her eyes were serious. Inelegantly, but yes. He took her hands in his. Marry me, Clara. Help me build not just a ranch, but a life, a family. Clara thought of all she had lost and all she had found on this journey west. The path had been difficult, marked by disappointments and challenges, but it had led her here to this man, this moment, this choice. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, I will marry you, Yates Sutton. Their second kiss was a seal on that promise, interrupted only by the sound of the schoolhouse door opening, and a woman's surprised, "Oh," followed by embarrassed giggles. Word of their engagement spread through the social like wildfire. Clara found herself surrounded by women offering congratulations and advice, while Yates endured good-natured ribbing from the men. Even Youngblood's presence couldn't dampen their happiness, though Clara noticed the rancher watching them with a calculating expression before departing early. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Clara continued her work at the cabin, now with the knowledge that she was preparing her own future home. Yates rode to the next county to secure a marriage license and returned with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. It's beautiful, Clara said as he slipped it onto her finger. Are you certain she would have approved of me wearing it? She would have loved you, Yates assured her. Strong, smart women always got along with my mother. They were married on a perfect June morning, with wildflowers decorating the small church and most of the community in attendance. Clara wore a new dress of cream-colored cotton, and Yates had splurged on a proper suit for the occasion. Cooter stood as Yates's best man, beaming with pride and occasionally wiping suspiciously moist eyes. Even Youngblood made an appearance, approaching them after the ceremony with what appeared to be genuine congratulations. "Marriage agrees with you, Sutton," he said, shaking Yates's hand. "Perhaps it will mellow your stubbornness." "I wouldn't count on it," Yates replied with a smile that held an edge of steel. Youngblood chuckled. "No, I suppose not." He turned to Clara. "Mrs. Sutton, you've chosen a hard-headed man, but a good one. I wish you both happiness." As he walked away, Clara looked questioningly at Yates. "Do you think he means it?" "Hard to tell with Youngblood. But today I choose to believe the best." Yates squeezed her hand. "Today is about beginnings, not old quarrels." Their wedding night was a revelation for Clara. Yates was as gentle and considerate a lover as she had hoped, guiding her through unfamiliar territory with patience and tenderness. Afterward, lying in his arms in what was now their bed, Clara felt a sense of rightness that transcended physical satisfaction. "Happy." Yates murmured against her hair. "Completely," she replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "Though I keep thinking about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "Building our life together, making this ranch thrive, perhaps children someday." Yates shifted to look into her eyes, his expression serious. "I want all of that with you, Clara, but I need you to know something. This land, this life, it's not easy. There will be drought years and harsh winters. Youngblood won't give up easily on that water claim." "I know," she said, touching his face. "I'm not afraid of hard work or challenges, Yates. I'm not some delicate flower who'll wilt at the first sign of trouble." His smile returned, tender and full of love. "No, you certainly are not. You're the strongest woman I've ever known." Life settled into a new rhythm after their marriage. Clara continued to manage the household, but now joined Yates in planning for the ranch's future. They decided to expand their garden, add chickens for eggs, and perhaps acquire a milk cow before winter. Word came that the town would indeed need another teacher by fall, as families continued to settle in the valley. The school board approached Clara with an offer that would allow her to teach while still maintaining her duties at the ranch. "You should accept," Yates encouraged her. "It's what you came west to do. But the ranch will still be here. We'll make it work together." Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it changes both expected and surprising. Clara's teaching position proved rewarding, though it meant long days balancing classroom and home responsibilities. Yates took on more household duties without complaint, often having supper waiting when she returned from town. More unexpected was the letter that arrived from Youngblood in late September, offering to purchase grazing rights on a portion of Yates's land at a surprisingly fair price. The offer came with a guarantee not to interfere with their water access. "What do you think?" Yates asked Clara as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in autumn gold. Clara considered carefully. "It seems reasonable." Perhaps losing his son made him value building something over destroying it. "Perhaps," Yates agreed. "Or maybe he's just getting older and tired of fighting. Either way, it would provide extra money for improvements to the ranch." Yates nodded, putting an arm around her shoulders. "I'll draft a response tomorrow." The tensions with Youngblood gradually eased, though Yates remained cautious in their dealings. By the time winter settled over the valley, bringing short days and long, cold nights, Clara and Yates had established not just a peaceful coexistence with their powerful neighbor, but the foundations of a prosperous future for themselves. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside and a fire crackling in the hearth of their much-improved cabin, Clara placed Yates's hand on her still flat stomach. "I have a gift for you," she said softly. "One that won't arrive until summer." Yates's eyes widened, hope and joy battling with disbelief. "Are you certain?" Clara nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "Dr. Reynolds confirmed it yesterday." With a whoop of joy, Yates lifted her and spun her around the room before setting her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Is that safe? Should you be resting?" Clara laughed. "I'm with child, not made of glass, though I may need more help with chores as time progresses." "Anything," Yates promised, kneeling before her and pressing a kiss to her stomach. "Everything. I'll build a proper cradle, and we'll need to expand the cabin before summer, another bedroom, and maybe a proper parlor." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it might burst. "I think we're doing exactly what you suggested that first day, building a life together." "Best decision I ever made," Yates said, rising to kiss her properly. "Taking that broom from your hands and asking for so much more." As they stood embraced before the fire, Clara reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her to this moment. The disappointments and setbacks that had seemed so devastating at the time had led her exactly where she needed to be, in the arms of a man who valued her strength as much as her tenderness, building a future filled with promise on this wild, beautiful frontier. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their small corner of Montana territory in pristine white. Inside, wrapped in love and the warmth of home, Clara and Yates Sutton planned their tomorrow.